What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and it's time to figure out what type of tempo magic deck we should be playing this weekend in Gods Unchained. So it's been a few weeks since our last balance patch. Magic has been far and away the best god for the past 3 weeks, and tempo magic is in a tier all its own in terms of power. So we already know what the best archetype to go with is. It is definitely tempo magic. So this video is going to be very different than any other video we've ever done in this series. Like I said, we haven't gotten any balance patches, so if I use the normal video format, this would essentially just be a repeat of last week. So we're still going to go over the god popularity and the most popular archetypes of each god, so you have a good idea of what you're facing up against when you match up against god X, Y, or Z over the weekend. But then in lieu of, looking at a whole bunch of different deck lists, like wasting 5 minutes pretending the death is worth playing this weekend, we're going to go into a deep, deep dive of tempo magic, talk about the shell of the deck, which cards have to be in there, and then all the other cards and combinations of cards you can slot in, with the goal being that we give you enough information that you can make a tempo magic list based off of your playstyle or your collection. And don't worry, there's still going to be a couple of pre-made deck lists that'll be in the description, a bunch of different tried and true tempo magic lists. But like I said, by the end of this video, hopefully I give you enough info about tempo magic that you can just make your own list based on your playstyle. So let's jump into the meta. Obviously, magic is the most popular archetype, or the most popular god, the most popular archetype being tempo magic. Nature is always very aggressive now. Its best chance of winning is to overwhelm their magic opponents in the early game, usually with a War's Wake, and then buffing everything with the Howler, and then buffing everything again with the Sing Song Satyr, and then buffing everything again with the Wildfire, and hopefully overwhelming their magic opponent with just a mess of stats in the early game. However, for Nature to do well against Magic, they kind of have to have the perfect draw, and then Magic has to have a poor draw. So Nature is a little bit iffy in the meta right now. A similar thing can be said about Deception. Deception's most common archetype is probably going to be Aggro Deception, and they can sometimes, get underneath those tempo magic decks with big Merrick turns, in combination with either a bunch of creature buffs or Baron of Whispers. But for the most part, they just sort of get destroyed by big AoE that tempo magic has access to. Let's see. Now we've got Death, which is still Heirloom Death. Heirloom Death is not particularly good against Magic because Magic doesn't give them a ton of creatures to trade their stuff into, and Death needs creatures to blitz into in order to do lots of damage. Then we have Light, which is just, Zoo Light. It's essentially the same as Zoo Nature, but a little bit worse. Light is in a semi-interesting position against Magic because there are a lot of ward creatures, as well as a lot of protected creatures in Light, and using cards like a Serene Blade, you can give protected creatures ward and protected, making it so they're very hard for Magic opponents to remove. So you could probably tailor-make a Light deck that's good-ish against Magic, however, it's going to be very weak against everything else. So once again, probably just go with Magic. And then War is usually a Relic-themed Zoo deck, which also can be decent against Magic, because Magic rarely runs Relic removal or Frontline. However, it's going to have a really tough time beating Death decks, Nature decks, really anything else. So you can, similar to Light, you can tailor-make a War deck against Magic, but it's going to have a hard time against everything else. That being said, when you run up against War, it's probably going to be some sort of Zoo-y Relic-themed deck. So now that we have talked about the meta a bit, let's jump into that deep dive into tempo magic. Alright, let's start our tempo magic discussion with the shell of the deck. In this handy Google Doc, I have all of the cards that are always in tempo magic lists. If you see a little X2 over any of the cards, it means it runs 2 copies. There are 22 cards that are always in tempo magic. This is the shell, the backbone of the deck. We're going to go over each of these cards, and then we're going to jump into a new Google document showing the other cards that you can fill in for those other 8 slots. So let's jump into that right now. We've got 2 copies of the Academy Apprentice. This card is super good. It is a 1-mana 1/1 with spell boost +1 and echo. So it's one card that can give you +2 spell boost for very, very cheap. And this deck runs a lot, and a lot of spells, a lot of AoE, a lot of single target removal, a lot of burn. It can really make great use out of all the spell boost that Academy Familiar is going to be dishing out. Then we've got the 1-mana spell Form of Power, which is a 1-mana spell that deals 2 damage to an enemy creature and 1 damage to their face. This card is really, really great in a spell boost oriented deck because it does two actions. It can make use of the spell boost to deal more damage to the opponent's creature, and it makes double use of the spell boost to deal damage to its face. So a single instance of spell boost +1 is effectively spell boost +2 for a card like Form of Unity, which is always very powerful. And now we're jumping into the 2 mana slot. We have Palace's Wand, which is a key card to this deck. It's probably the most expensive card that you absolutely need, but you absolutely need it. It's a 2 mana relic. After you play a magic card, it gains +1 durability. You can remove 3 durability to draw a card. Your deck is very cheap. You are incentivized to play multiple cards in one turn, so it's very important to have some consistent card draw in the deck to continue to reload your hand. Then we have Demetrios. Demetrios, is more card draw. He's also another cheap spell that you can make use of with all of your spell boost type cards. That are Academy Apprentice. I always call it Academy Familiar. Screw it up every time. I'll probably screw it up in this video. But this is a really great card. Your opponent has to answer it. If you're playing against something like War or Light, they might have a hard time. Like your removal of Light's Levy, but you have better Levy targets. If this doesn't go, if this goes unanswered, you might get a 4 or 5 power like Demetrios spell, which can be absolutely game-winning, just super strong. Vortimir is another creature-oriented draw mechanic. It's very easy to give him 3 attack by playing multiple spells a turn. You get to draw a card, you get to deal face damage. It's pretty much exactly what your deck is trying to do. Then we have 2 copies of Blizzard Bolt, which can be used as creature removal, or it can go face after you play a bunch of spell boost stuff to end the game. Pretty simple card, self-explanatory. Tracking Bolt, very similar to Blizzard Bolt, except for Tracking Bolt has the option to deal 1 damage to each enemy creature, and since you have lots of spell boost stuff, that can be a lot of big AoE that can help beat your nature opponents or light opponents or war opponents, I guess. Now we are moving into the 3 mana slot. We have 2 copies of Arcane Transcendent. He is very key to this deck. He is a 3 mana 3/3 with a roar effect of reduce the cost of a spell in your hand by 2, as long as you have that many mana crystals, at that current time. He is primarily cheapening this Unbound Flame. We're going to skip over to that because this is one of the most key cards of the deck. This is a new Mortal Judgment card. It's a 5 mana spell. It deals 5 damage to a target, or you can empower 2 to also deal 5 damage to each creature. So if you use your Arcane Transcendent or something like a Warped Engineer to make it 3 mana for its base cost, you can empower it for 5 and then deal 5 damage to your opponent's face and each creature, which is going to clear the board, at the 5 mana slot. That's one of the reasons why Tempo Magic is so good. It's very difficult for any other creature-oriented deck to build a board of creatures that have more than 5 health this early on in the game. So having your Arcane Transcendent hit your Unbound Flames is incredibly powerful. Then we have Keralis Runemoth, which is just like a super value creature. Similar to Demetrios, it's another must-kill creature. It generates you a 0 mana rune every single turn. 0 mana spells are great tempo, and this is tempo magic, so it's exactly what you want in the deck. And then right here, we don't have a card, but there's always a 3 mana draw card. There's a variety of different ones you can pick from. We're going to take a look at all the different options when we look at the remaining cards to add into the deck. It can be All-Seeing Spire, it can be Cram, it can be Bibliomatic, whatever it's called. There's a lot of different choices for your 3 mana draw card, but you will be running 2 copies of it. Then we have Worm Breath, which is very self-explanatory. 4 mana spell that deals 5 damage to whatever you want. You can kill your opponent with it, you can kill a big creature. Very easy to wrap your head around. And now we have Unannounced Arrival, another new Mortal Judgment card. This is a 4 mana spell. When you play it, you delve a 4 mana creature, and then you deal 1 damage to all enemy creatures. So another card that's absolutely amazing with spell boost. If you have an Academy Apprentice or Street Conjurer out, it can be a big AoE clear, and then you get a very decent sized creature. It's always plus value. You're going to be killing a few of your opponent's creatures, and then you get something that costs 4, and you spent 4 to get it. And there are some huge high rolls. You might play this card, clear your opponent's board, and end the turn with a Highborn Knight. Unannounced Arrival is super good. It's also a great card to be cheapified by your Arcane Transcendent, so you can combo it with even more spell boost stuff for big turns. And we already talked about the Unbound Flames. So those are the 22 cards that have to be in Tempo Magic. This is the shell, and now let's jump into the fun part. All of the the other cards, the other combinations to really give the deck its uniquity and its flavor. Alright, now we are on to the fun part. All of the remaining cards that we're going to talk about are the choices that you can put in for the remaining slots of your deck. We are going to start with that 3 mana draw slot, As you saw on the other document, every single tempo magic deck runs a 3-mana draw, like spell or creature, and these are your choices. I have them arranged in order of success. The best tempo magic decks tend to run All-Seeing Spire. Then there's Cram. A lot of, not a lot, a good amount of tempo magic decks run Aether Snaps. So if you're, trying to do Aether Snap Miracle turns, having another spell in the deck could be beneficial. So there's also Cram to guarantee you 2 spells. And then the final one is the Bibliomaniac, which is a 3-mana 1/1 that draws you a card and has Echo draw you a card. So this is 4 mana technically to draw you the same mana cards as Cram, but you do get the 2 bodies. All-Seeing Spire has the lowest floor but the highest ceiling. You're guaranteed to get 1 card when you end your turn, and you might get 5 cards, who knows. Cram is the easy middle ground, guarantees 2 cards, and then Bibliomaniac is the most mana but gives you those little tiny bodies to generate some favor. Alright, so now let's jump into all of the other things that you might want to throw into your deck. We are going to start with the 1-mana cards. Let's see, we've got Flying Carpet. Flying Carpet is really great in the mirror match because of its ability to destroy Arcane Transcendence. Using a 1-mana creature to destroy a 3-mana creature is really good. The fact that it has Ward is also very nice because of the fact that Magic usually wants to use its God power to kill 1-health creatures, and it takes 2 turns to do that. It also can dodge AoE because of its Ward, which is very powerful. Shadow Scryer is an obvious one, just super strong card. Magic staple since forever. Hard to remove, great keywords. It helps put your deck into good order. Shadow Scryer is a very strong card that you can put into your tempo magic decks. Now we have Street Conjure. Street Conjure is a card that I usually always run. Just more 1-mana spell boost is really, really good. You have lots of 1-mana spells that deal damage, 2-mana spells, the AoE. Street Conjure just synergizes with pretty much your entire deck. Dimension Door is decent for card draw. Dimension Doors are almost always in decks that run the Aether Snaps. We talked about that a bit when we talked about Cram. If you run Dimension Door, you probably also run Aether Snap. Now we have Ancient Text, which is, like Form of Power, another 1-mana deal 2. It's very, very powerful with all of your spell boost cards, and every once in a while you can use it to protect your face or protect a creature for a trade, but for the most part it's just 2 mana for lots and lots of damage. Alright, now we are moving on to the 2-mana cards you might want to throw into your deck, starting off with Warped Engineer. Warped Engineer is essentially the same as Arcane Transcendent. It cheapifies one of your very powerful spells so that you can have a strong combination turn. I usually run 2 copies of Warped Engineer in my tempo magic decks. That way you can be more liberal with your Arcane Transcendent, maybe make a Cram cheaper, maybe make an Unannounced Arrival cheaper, and still have lots of mana reduction left to hit your Unbound Flames. I'm a big fan of the Warped Engineer in the tempo magic deck. Now we have Pyramid Warden, just Gods Unchained staple in general. Pyramid Warden is a very strong tempo card, the highest stats you can play for a 2-mana creature. We talked about War a little bit in the beginning. They could hit you in the face with a big weapon, and this is the only front line that Magic tends to run. Also, Pyramid Warden is just big. If you want to put Pyramid Warden in your deck and you own a Pyramid Warden, it's not going to be a bad call. Next up is Starshard Bolt. Starshard Bolt is not always in tempo magic decks. Usually, if you have Starshard Bolt in your deck, you're omitting one of your 3-mana cards, but I'm sure you can slot it in. Some people even run like 1 Tracking Bolt, 1 Starshard Bolt, but Starshard Bolt's easy to wrap your head around. It destroys a creature for pretty cheap. Alright, now we are jumping into the 3-mana cards, the power cards. We have Aether Snap as well as Vow of Learning. Aether Snap is very fun. You are incentivized to play lots of cards in one turn with all your spell boosty stuff, so you can have big miracle turns where you ping a lot of damage away, with your Aether Snaps. Also, if you run into something like Dralamar Magic or like Portal Wrangler Magic or School Teacher Magic, one of the combo Magic archetypes, they always pick Clearmind God Power, which means they have essentially no way of dealing with Aether Snaps, and you can essentially just win the game on the spot with those Aether Snaps. But keep in mind, if you have the Aether Snaps, you're probably going to want to incorporate Ancient Text and Dimension Doors into your deck. And when you're deciding which 3-mana draw card you want to incorporate into your deck, you might want to go with Cram, since the Aether Snap is incentivizing you to have more spells. And now we have Vow of Learning, another very, very powerful 3-mana card, probably the most versatile of any of the 3-mana power cards. You get to pick 2 effects. You can deal 1 damage to whatever you want, 2 damage to a creature, or give a creature protected or ward. Just like Form of Power, when we were looking at the shell of the deck, that's a card that compounds extra on all of your spell boost cards. If you pick deal 2 damage and deal 1 damage, and you have spell boost +1, you get effectively spell boost +2. So if you want to add those Vows of Learning into your deck, you might want to incorporate having the 2 copies of Street Conjure so that you have 4 1-mana spell boost cards in your deck to really capitalize on those big Vow of Learning plays. Flying Carpet is another one of the 1-mana creatures you might want to consider if you run Vow of Learning. It'd probably be better than like Shadow Scryer in that regard, seeing as that every once in a while you're going to not have enough creatures to target with the damage dealing effects, and Flying Carpet could be a decent creature to like catch a protected every now and then. But that is essentially it for all of the choices you have to fit into your Tempo Magic deck. Let's look at some of the tried and true lists that some of the top players have been playing. Alright, so the first tried and true Tempo Magic list we're going to look at is Jrok 96's. Jrok was the original creator of this modern day Tempo Magic list. We actually showed this exact deck list off, I think 3 weeks ago, the week that Jrok made it. And as you can see with the selection area of the deck, Jrok has gone with 2 copies of Warped Engineer. He has selected All-Seeing Spire for his 3-mana draw engine. He's got 2 copies of Ancient Texan here, as well as 2 copies of Street Conjure for even more spell boost, face damage action. Let's see, he does not have either copies of Aether Snaps or Vow of Learning. Instead, he has 2 copies of Star Shard Bolt, so all 6 of the bolts. As you can see with Jrok's list, he's taken more of a board control approach to this. He has 2 copies of the Tracking Bolts for AoE, 2 copies of the Announced Arrival, obviously, as well as the Unbound Flames. All the decks have that. He has extra spell boost to make sure he can get more AoE off of all of that. Jrok himself has played 113 games with a 77% win rate, and the entire world has played over 1,100 games with a 63% win rate. So this variation of Tempo Magic is definitely very, very powerful. And now let's take a look at Mirage's variation of Tempo Magic. He himself has only played 3 games with it, but the rest of the world has played over 55, and this version of the deck has proven itself to be very powerful. As you can see, Mirage has went with the Aether Snap package. He selected Cram for his 3-mana draw card, probably because he's incentivized to play spells with that Aether Snap, as we discussed before. He also has 2 copies of Dimension Door, and he's gone with the Pyramid Warden in order to, have more stats than his opponent. And the last Tempo Magic list we'll be looking at was made by Squid. Keep in mind, all of these lists will be in the description of the video, so you can just copy and paste those real easily. Squid has gone with the Vow of Learning for his deck. As you can see, he's gone with the All-Seeing Spire, just like Jrok for his 3-mana draw engine. He has 2 copies of Flying Carpet, which, as we discussed, is quite good in the mirror match and is pretty decent in combination with Vow of Learning for those situations where sometimes you give something protected. Usually you'll be picking the damage options, but it happens every once in a while. Squid also has a copy of Iron-Tooth Goblin here, to destroy his Death opponent's Skull Scepters, his Control Magic opponent's Talismans. Control Magic is also going to be relatively common, but you'll be seeing way, way more Tempo Magic decks over this weekend ranked event. And also, surprise, we do have a Control Magic deck to look at. This deck is very, very similar to Tempo Magic. As you can see, there are a lot of overlapping cards. We're not going to go into too much detail about this deck, because you should really be playing Tempo Magic, but this deck's been performing well, and it has lots of dragons, which is kind of cool. But whether you decide to go with one of these tried and true Tempo Magic decks, you decide to build your own with all the information that was dumped on you in this video, try to have fun at this weekend ranked event. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord, and have a wonderful day. Hey you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!